Hello and welcome to this first video in this first topic, data representation and information. This is for the Cambridge International AS Level Information Technology, and we're looking at data and information. Okay, as you can see, we've got 11 topics to cover in AS Level Information Technology. You will study all of these 11 topics. Okay, but the first topic is data processing and information, and we're going to be looking at the first part out of 5, data and information. What is the difference between data and information? Okay, so what we're going to learn, I've just said the differences between data and information, including identifying that data becomes information through context and meaning, uses of direct and indirect data and their suitability for given purposes, sources of direct data, for example, questionnaires, interviews, data logging, observations, sources of indirect data, for example, weather data, census data, electoral register data, businesses collecting personal information when used by third parties, research from textbooks, journals, and websites. And we're going to be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of direct and indirect data. Okay, it's a big area of study, this first part of this first topic. Okay, so what is data? Let's have a little talk about what is data. Data is like raw materials, like pieces of wood or metal before they are made into something useful. The word data is actually the plural form of datum, which means one single piece of data. But we often use data for both singular and plural, like saying the data is incorrect instead of the data are incorrect. Data can be numbers, letters, symbols, images, audio clips, video clips, and more. But on their own, these things are just raw data and don't have any meaning yet. Information is data that has been processed and given meaning. It's like taking the raw materials and making them into a finished product that we can understand. Basically taking a pile of wood and turning it into a table. A computer or a person can process the raw data and give it context and meaning, turning it into information. The main difference is data has no meaning, but information does. Okay, so here we go. There's some sets of numbers and letters here, but this is raw data. They don't mean anything at the moment. We've got a row of numbers here, another row of numbers, and then we've got some Greek letters. Okay, but on their own, these sets of data don't have any meaning. But if we're told that the first set of numbers are the postal codes of India, okay, they become information, and we understand that they relate to a certain area in India. Okay, and the second set of numbers are telephone codes for the UK, and they also become information, and we can understand where each area, where each code relates to in terms of the UK. The last set of letters look like some Greek symbols, but mixed with some Latin letters. But if we're told that these represent scientific variables, like standard deviation, forces, mass, etc., then they become meaningful information in that context. So the key point is that raw data becomes useful information once it's processed and put into a context that gives it meaning. So let's have a little look. Data processing. Basically, we should all know this. Computers store data as a bunch of ones and zeros, binary, which are called binary digits or bits. There you go. Binary digits, shortened version is bits. This data can be stored on different devices like hard drives, memory cards, or even on computers' memory and RAM. But this data doesn't have any meaning yet. It's like raw numbers and codes. To make the data useful, it needs to be processed or worked on in some way. Processing data means doing different operations or actions on it to produce new data from the original. For example, you might have worked with data files like .csv files in a spreadsheet program. When you add formula or calculations to these files, you're processing the data to give it some meaning. So the basic steps are, basically the data is inputted or fed into the computer. The computer stores the data in its memory or on storage devices. The computer processes or works on data in different ways. The processed data is then output as useful information. So let's have a little look at this first activity. We've just done the difference between data and information. So let's break this down a little bit further. Data is raw and processed facts or figures with no inherent meaning. Example, numbers, letters, symbols, images, audio, video. Information is data that has been processed and given context to make it meaningful. Data becomes information when put into a specific context. The key difference, data has no meaning on its own. Information is data with added context and meaning. Examples showing the difference. These numbers is just data, a number, but when we're told it's the Indian postal code, it becomes meaningful information. In essence, data is meaningless raw material, while information is data made understandable through processing and context. I hope that makes it clear. So, let's have a little look. Direct and indirect data. What on earth does this mean? Direct data. This is the data that is collected for a specific reason or purpose. It's like gathering information directly from the source for that particular use only. So, for example, doing a survey or a questionnaire, interviewing people, observing and recording things yourself, using sensors or devices to automatically log data. This data is collected fresh for the exact purpose you need for it. Okay, indirect data. This is data that already exists, collected by someone else originally. It's information you get from a third-party source, not directly collected by you. You use this data for a different purpose than what it was first collected for. For example, getting a list of names and addresses from the electoral roll or the electoral register. Companies collecting people's personal information and then selling it to other businesses. This indirect data was collected by others initially for their own original purposes. So the key differences: direct data is collected first-hand by you, specifically for your purpose. Indirect data comes from third-party sources, originally gathered for some other reason. Okay, and I've got a couple of examples here. A school survey. The school does a direct survey by asking students about their favourite sport and activities. This is direct data. This data is collected first-hand from the students for the purpose of planning new clubs' facilities. However, the school then shares some of this data with a local sports equipment store, with permission, of course. The sports store uses the indirect data about students' favourite sports to market certain products to them. Okay, so we've got direct and indirect data there. Another example, streaming services such as Netflix collects data directly from you about your shows, movies you watch. Okay, every time you click on something, it remembers it and recommends other things to you. Okay, Netflix also gets indirect data about general viewing trends and popular titles from third-party rating sources. This indirect data helps them decide which new shows, movies to add to their library. And then we finish off, we're going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of direct and indirect data. So, looking at relevance, direct data sources, the data will be relevant because what is needed has been collected. Okay. Additionally, data that is not required will exist that may take time to sort through, and some data that is required may not exist. Okay. Source trustworthiness. The original source is known and so can be trusted. The original source may not be known, so it can't be assumed that it is reliable. Time efficiency. It can take a long time, a very long time, to gather original data rather than using data that you already exist. It's a lot quicker to do a search over the internet for something rather than going out and asking people on an individual basis. The data is immediately available. Okay, sample size. A large sample of statistical data can be difficult to collect for one-off purposes. If statistical analysis is required, then there are more likely to be large samples available. Currency of data. The data is likely to be up to date because it has been collected recently. Data may be out of date because it was collected at a different time. Bias. Bias can be eliminated by asking specific questions. Original data may be biased due to its source. So data format. Okay, in direct terms, the data can be collected and presented in the format required, whereas indirectly, the data is unlikely to be in a format required, which may make extracting the data difficult or taking time putting it into a format that can be understood and needed. Okay, that is it. That is it for this first video. I know there's been a lot of text there and a lot of reading on my part, but I hope it's been useful. If so, please join me in the next video, and I'll say bye for now. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Please continue to ask questions, leave your comments, hit notifications, and please subscribe. And finally, if you wish to buy me a coffee, I'd be truly grateful. Please visit buymeacoffee.com/learning zone. Thank you very much indeed. See you next time. Bye for now.